On top of the town, it's all about you.
Good evening and welcome to Talk of the Town. I'm Charlotte Gouws, and tonight we're diving into a topic that touches every family, every community and almost every person at some point in their life: relationships and marriage. Joining me in studio is someone I've known and respected for over 10 years, Dr Francois Wessels, a counsellor who specialises in marriage counselling but also works extensively in family, individual, bereavement or grief and trauma counselling. He also does a short video on YouTube called Sit in mekaar se stilte, or Sitting in each other's silence, translated to English. Dr. Wessels has spent decades working with couples through crisis, conflict, restoration, and sometimes even new beginnings. Tonight we're talking honestly about what makes marriages work, why they fall apart, and how counselling can change the direction of a relationship. Dr. Wessels, welcome.
Such a privilege to be here. Thank you, Charlotte.
For those who don't know you, what led you into counselling, specifically marriage counselling?
I think life, to such a significant extent, is all about relationships. And as an institution of relationships, marriage is so precious, sacred ground, holy ground. And for me to be able to take my shoes off and venture onto that holy space, such a privilege. And that's really a burning bush experience.
That's special, thank you. After all these years, what still moves you about this work?
As with every marriage counseling, and you've indicated that in your introduction, there's never just a restoration of an old relationship. It's always new. And in the way that that novelty is introduced into marriage and marriage counseling, it always remains new and exciting and new ground for me as well. Hence my involvement over these years.
In your 60s now, how has your perspective on marriage changed when you first started?
You know, one knows all the answers before you ventured into any initiative, whether that's parenthood or marriage. You know all the answers, only to realize and discover you knew nothing. So, yes, initially my ideas about marriage and serious relationships was rhythmatic, or perhaps we can call it transactional, a transaction. You do this, I do that. We input this almost like Isaac Newton, cause and effect. If I invest this, I'm definitely going to get this outcome. Doesn't work that way. So whereas my ideas were, about marriage, previously very simplistic and according to a set recipe, I've only come to realize that it's a path. It's not a linear initiative. It's a path. Sometimes you take 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, but within those 2 steps that you take back, you learn so much. You are equipped to such an extent for that pilgrimage forward, actually. And I think a pilgrimage is not a bad metaphor here either.
What's the biggest myth people believe about marriage?
That it's easy. That something also that we are going to complete each other. In other words, entering marriage with a scarcity perspective, an emptiness perspective. The expectation, I'm going to be filled here, rather than realizing that as an image of God, you are already complete, filled, and you can share your fullness with each other rather than your emptiness.
Have you ever wanted to hide underneath your desk in a session?
I wouldn't say that I wanted to hide under my desk. I actually wanted to stand behind my chair and be protected, because I once had a couple coming to see me, and I was met with so much aggression from one of the partners that I was just amazed and thinking, yes, I don't want to be part of this game. These rules are not my rules, and I wanted to hide somewhere. Perhaps not under the desk, perhaps somewhere where I would be shielded against all the bombardment of aggression that I was meeting with, you know.
Are marriages struggling more today than 20 years ago? Or are we just more honest about it?
The counter question might be, is life more challenging these days? And if you answer yes to that, invariably, the same will apply to marriages as well. We just have to think about social media, for instance. The challenges, but also the opportunities that might arise from social media. But virtuality, I think actually, having said that, the most significant challenge now as compared to, say, 20 years ago is stress. The cortisol levels that we're living with, and all the results physiologically spilling over into emotions, spirituality even, and the challenges those pose to marriages.
What would you say are the top 3 issues couples fight about?
I want to come back to this later, but having to be right in a marriage or in any relationship, any dialogue for that matter. Our roles have changed significantly. If you enter the marriage with a breadwinner identity or identification, and that changes, you will have serious challenges that you're meeting up with. As I've said, roles and the other thing, and it's hard that has become such a reality, but infidelity. You can just watch any television series. Somewhere, infidelity will play a role. And that's not just coincidence, or they're not fabricating something. It's a reality that they're actually describing. And I think that is, it's a serious challenge. It's a serious challenge in many marriages.
I've read a book where the guy says you have a love bank, and when you and your wife or husband are not spending time together, you are spending time with somebody, a colleague or somebody's friend or whatever, they pay money into your love bank, which means your bank account with your partner, your husband and your wife, might be depleted at some stage, but you have so much money or attention or whatever you want to call it from that other person. And that's how easy it is to get involved in a relationship with somebody else.
Perhaps a good word which I like and which I try and implement these days is witnessing. The experience that I'm being witnessed. If you haven't got that experience of being witnessed within your marriage, and you do experience that elsewhere, it's going to mean so much to you that quite often it may take you on a path which was perhaps not anticipated and so on. And that is why it's so important that when we meet somebody, for instance, that we don't try and impress, try and put our best foot forward, but rather in a very authentic way, witness the person. Witnessing here implying that I'm hearing you, I'm listening to you, and I'm reflecting what that is actually awakening in me as well. So that it's not, let me give you an example. If somebody asks you how you are today, instead of just replying, I'm fine, thanks, and cutting off the conversation there, a real witnessing would actually be more alike to what we have in the Zulu language, where we say, Sawubona, I see you, I witness you as a human being. And I think if we can have that experience in our marriages every morning when we get up, throughout the day, when we go to bed in the evening, I see you. I see you in your being, your human beingness. And we can take that further and make it into a spiritual event as well, where I see the Imago Dei in you. There are two needs, perhaps, and these are spiritual needs. There are two needs that we bring into our marriages. And one might be longing to have something to look forward to aspire to, and belonging, that coming home, feeling safe. This is our safe space. We cannot underestimate the importance of having a safe space. It's only from that state that we can explore, that we can be vulnerable, that we can reach out and be creative about our relationships as well. Intimacy, safe space, so important.
How much of marital conflict is actually about communication?
Charlotte, I don't think communication is really the problem. I think communication is the symptom. I think that if you have a safe communication space, a place where I can voice, my voice can be heard, that's different from just make or reducing that to saying that communication is the problem. It's more symptomatic of, please hear me, please witness me. And that requires a safe communication space where I can differ from you, but in such a way that you still feel authentic, witnessed. The other thing is that a safe space, a safe communication space, gives me the opportunity to celebrate otherness, where so often we hope for sameness, but there's such a rich meaningfulness in diversity, in otherness. But that can only happen in a safe space, once again.
Do you see financial stress playing a role in marriages?
Indeed. Indeed. If we think about marriages previously, where perhaps historically there was a strong economical initiative in getting married. You married for economic security. And these days, with two people having to contribute an income to a household, and invariably the stresses that that bring about because of the time challenges, for instance. So not only financial challenges per se, but also what do we have to do to compensate for that, and availability, or being available to the other person, for instance, access, that type of thing, finance and financial security and safety often impacts on those fields.
When should a couple seek counselling, before or after the crisis?
The wish is, and perhaps it's more than a wish, it's a prayer that people would do something about a problem sooner rather than later. At latest, when the first signs show up that we have a challenge here. I think the best scenario is where, on a regular basis, we decide that we want to invest in our marriage, and we rather become proactive rather than reactive. And this might be attending marriage courses and such, or just telling each other that we need to, as in any, and I don't want to use this metaphor, but as in any business, you need to do development. And in that respect, marriages are like enterprises. You need to invest. And therefore, it's better sooner rather than later, proactive rather than reactive.
What comes to mind is something simple like, don't buy your wife flowers because you did something wrong, just buy her flowers.
Another topic that might become very important in this conversation is to still have a sense of awe about our relationship. That one never becomes blasé about a relationship. The ability to look at the person across from me and look at her in wonder and in awe. There's such a body of evidence about the effect of an awe-inspired life and how it re-enchants everyday living. So that's so important. And that, even if you pick a flower from the garden and just offer it to your wife, it might be something insignificant to a lot of other people, but just the beauty in that, to share beauty. And it makes such a difference in a world which is performance-driven, and the result of that is so often an experience of, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. And in so many marriages, the not good enough metaphor or discourse plays such a significant role as well.
What are early warning signs that a marriage is in trouble?
Silence. You mentioned sitting in each other's silence. That's a different type of silence. It's a meditative, contemplative silence. But in Afrikaans, we've got a word called stilstype. When silence becomes the substitute for a safety space, it's usually indicative of we've gone beyond the fight and flight. We're now in lockdown. I can't hear you anymore. It's a neural, it's a physiological experience or phenomenon. When marriage trauma has taken such a toll that you don't feel safe to the extent that I'm now just going to freeze and lock down, language cannot penetrate that anymore. And you will often hear people saying, "You don't hear me." And perhaps it's because we ventured so far down the road of marriage conflict that we can't do that anymore. So silence, I think, is one of the most important telltale signs. People respond differently to the need to have a feeling of being safe. Sometimes we want to substitute control for safety. So, in other words, if I feel that I'm in control, it acts as a substitute for security. That may take the form of, I have to be right. So that's another telltale. When you start to experience the need to always be right, when there's a disagreement or just in general in a relationship, also a warning signal.
Can a marriage recover from infidelity?
I wouldn't be in this calling if I didn't believe that change and transformation is always possible. But infidelity is like addiction. There are so many similarities. Quite often, the seeds of infidelity would be broken relationships, the need to find it somewhere else. And infidelity will require an openness, transparency. Once again, how do we recreate the safe space of our marriage? How do we recreate that? And do not ever think that it will be the same marriage ever again. As with any other marriage problems, once those are resolved, you're actually in a new marriage. Same with infidelity as well.
Is there something that, in your experience, almost always predicts divorce?
I would revert back to the need to be right. If a couple comes to see me and the one partner is only there for my confirmation that he or she is right, I don't really see a future for such a process of reconciliation. And sometimes, it's not good for people to stay together. It becomes toxic. And once you've reached that stage, it's almost like a pivot point. Perhaps it's better for them to be on their own. It's a hard thing to say, but and it goes counter to so many other dreams that we might have for marriages and relationships. But sometimes it's better for one partner or for both of them not to be married.
I've realized sometimes that two people in a marriage aren't necessarily one a bad partner. It's just that the combination of the two is not good. So person A and B are married. They are having a lot of conflict. If they get divorced and they find somebody else, then everything goes well. It's just that A and B had some reason to not work out, to bring out the bad in the other person.
But you know, Charlotte, in narrative therapy, we talk about externalization, which means the person is not the problem is the problem. And if we can do that, if we can separate person and problem, we can still have a amicable relationship with a person beyond divorce, because we blame the problem and not the person. And sometimes, just yesterday, somebody told me about how after their divorce, her ex-husband still came to have coffee with her parents, and there was such a good relationship because they separated person from problem. And this is not saying that you don't have to take responsibility for what's happening, but it's just that if you need to forgive somebody, to reconcile, whatever, you need to separate person from problem.
What does healthy conflict actually look like?
Oh, this sounds like a record that has now started to always go back to the same place, but I can't overemphasize the need for safety. If we agree, and this is something which best happens before the marriage, if we agree on how we're going to create a space within which we can differ from each other, and invariably that will happen. No two people always agree on everything. So we need to create a space within which we can say, let's give this challenge a name. And the two of us can sit next to each other, look at the problem, and say, how are we going to counter this problem? Not look at each other as opponents in a very antagonistic way, but let's isolate the problem, give it a name, and then address it. See what it's doing to our marriage, what it's stealing from our marriage. The other thing as well, come to think of it, is also to not only think about the problem, but also think about what is the breeding ground for this problem. It requires, as any virus or bacteria, it requires a certain growth medium. Problems require a certain growth culture within which they thrive. And it's always good to identify that as well.
Some practical advice. What daily habits strengthen a marriage?
Yeah. To check in on each other every morning. That witnessing that I was referring to previously. To authentically ask somebody, where are you today? What is your body telling you about where you are today? What are the things that will be important for you this day? And when you get home in the evening, before you go to bed, authentically, once again, touch in on it, check in on each other. Not only how was your day, and inquiring about all the meetings and that type of thing, but how did you experience this day? And I used the word touch just now, substituted it for something else, but anyway, I think that to feel that you're touched by somebody, whether that's physical or emotional or even spiritual, is so important. And to make that into a habit, that when we pass each other in the passage, not just like two trains in a tunnel, but that you acknowledge each other. You know, any great journey starts with a step, and we should never underestimate the importance of small things, small steps. Just a hand on your shoulder, just acknowledging, witnessing each other once again.
How important is friendship in a marriage?
Friendship might be the thread that carries the story. A lot of things change in the course of a relationship. Looks, physical ability, roles. Retirement might become a reality in your life. Illness, chronic illness, disability. And I think the thing that might survive all of these, because it's not performance-driven, is friendship. But that's the type of friendship which once again says, I'm holding you. I think this gesture, two hands cupped, not trying to squeeze, just that I'm carrying you in the lightness of your being, basically. That's friendship.
I spoke to a friend of mine the other day and she said to me, I'm very hard on myself. And she said, if you were your friend, would you allow your friend to speak to you that way? I said, wow. And I think that's something that comes to mind here as well. If your partner, if your husband or your wife is your friend, would you speak to your friend the way that you are speaking to that person that you're supposed to love? So I really think...
But perhaps something also, Charlotte, I think self-care. It's so easy to become carers of another, but something which is also important, although you're in a relationship, is self-care as well, that you're kind to yourself, that you're graceful to yourself. That's so important.
What's one question couples should ask each other more often?
This will come across as a funny thing, but what is your body telling you this morning? Why am I saying this? We have started to live from the neck up, and only acknowledging what is happening from the neck up. The body has so much wisdom in itself. When you enter any room, before you've analyzed it rationally, you will have a sense of, is this a friendly space? Is this a cold space? And in the same way, your body keeps the score of your day. So acknowledging that and sensitizing one another to that, and then giving words to it, might become such an intimate moment in any relationship.
If you could give every married couple one rule, what would that be?
What's the golden rule of life again? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I don't think we can improve on that really. Previously we were talking about oneness, becoming one. And this is perhaps one way of acknowledging that we are no longer two partners in a business venture or a contract or whatever. We are one in a very intimate way, and if we could do unto one another as we would have them do unto us.
And instead of saying, I'm waiting for you to do this for me so that I can do this for you. Doing something nice.
That's a transaction, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do couples reconnect after drifting apart?
With patience. The easy answer might be that you have to invest again, almost like a piggy bank, and you put coins in there and eventually it fills up and now we're back again. Perhaps it's not that. Perhaps it's not that. I'm going to tell a story which I think illustrates the point that I want to make. There was this gentleman who retired into an old age home. And as he was sitting in the waiting room, waiting for his room to be prepared, and as the assistant came to him, he said to her, "I so love my beautiful room. I'm going to be so happy in it." And she says to him, "But you haven't seen this." He says, "Yes, but this morning when I got up, I decided it was going to be a beautiful room and I'm going to be happy in it." The same thing. That when we've drifted apart, we don't wait for all the coins to add up in our piggy bank of relationship. We look with new eyes into our relationship. We decide. The lens that I'm using this morning is a lens of togetherness, oneness again. And what would my marriage look like through that lens? You know, our realities are so dictated by the lenses with which we get up in the morning.
My mom has a very nice saying when she and her friends come together to have coffee or lunch or whatever the situation is. There's always somebody that says, "Oh, my husband did this, my husband did that," and it's more negative. And she would turn the conversation and just mention something positive my dad did. Even if it's something that was done a while ago, but she focuses on the positive. She focuses on what he does right.
But you know, Charlotte, when you look through the lenses of hope at the world, what do you see? It's like a radar. Certain things will register on the radar. The hope things will register. The rest will not be seen, you know.
You don't always just see couples. What other counselling do you do?
I do a lot of life transition work. Trauma, unfortunately, we live in a world where trauma is quite common. So that's one of the things which I journey with so often. And then something which is more exciting is perhaps the re-enchantment of everyday life. People who want to live a lighter life and to journey with them. And that perhaps links onto spiritual direction, which I also do. Yeah.
Are men becoming more open to counselling?
I think so, yes. I think so, yes. We live with cultural discourses which tell us that cowboys don't cry, men should be tough, men should create a safe space instead of co-create. And those discourses will prevent them from seeking help. But I do see people admitting to their vulnerability as well. I think, especially in the second half of life, people become aware of vulnerability and that looking for help is not weakness, that type of thing. Especially when they've suffered loss or trauma in their lives. they are confronted with these realities.
What are the biggest barriers preventing people from seeking help?
Quite often the narratives that we inherit, so said cultural discourses, in marriage, for instance, that what happens in the house stays there, and so the things that we inherit. So often in life, it's so important that we ask questions. What are the things which do not serve us anymore? And abandon those in a release or just giving them up type of thing, and then breathing, and now I'm ready to venture into the next chapter, and if that requires that I get some help, yes, by all means.
What would you say to someone watching tonight who feels stuck or hopeless?
I think stuckness quite often feature in narrative therapy. We talk about narrative foreclosure, which says there's no real future here. It is what it is. This is it. And if we start to live into those stories, we will experience a certain stuckness. And on the other hand, if we are prepared to perhaps venture onto a 5-step path, where first of all we ground ourselves. That safety thing that I've been punting forever this evening, that we ground ourselves, that we grieve that which is amiss. What is wrong here? The stuckness. What stories worked into my experience of stuckness? And then that we deliberately adopt all practices. Go for an all walk once every week, where you just walk through the neighborhood deliberately, noticing the clouds, the sunset, the trees. Expose yourself to all. And once you've done that, then you've created space for reauthoring a new story and living into that in a re-engagement as well. So those might be 5 root markers for a re-enchantment, exiting the stuckness paradigm.
After all what you've seen, do you still believe marriage is worth fighting for?
Indeed. Indeed. Marriage is an institution, but it's an institution which is invested with significance, with meaningfulness. And it becomes such a home for that belonging that I mentioned previously. But at the same time, it should be in relationship with longing, that there's something to look forward to. Yes, indeed, I am still positive, investing in the institution of marriage.
Francois, thank you for your wisdom, your honesty, and decades of experience that you bring to this conversation. If there's one thing we're reminded of tonight, it's the strong marriages don't happen by accident. They're built intentionally. And sometimes asking for help isn't a sign of failure, it's a sign of courage. If you would like to connect with Dr. Francois Wessels, we'll share his contact details on our page. Thank you for joining us on Talk of the Town. I'm Charlotte, and remember, healthy relationships build healthy communities. Good night.